Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about data automation, automating data flow throughout a company, in particular, automating data pipelines, which is essential for enterprise-level artificial intelligence. To discuss that, I'm joined by someone very close to the topic. With me is Sean Knapp, CEO and founder of Ascend.io. Sean, happy Friday to you. Very good to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, James.
I'm sure there are many people who are familiar with Ascend. For those who aren't, please give us kind of the very brief elevator pitch. What does Ascend do?
Ascend provides a high-end level of automation for creating data pipelines. And in particular, whether you're creating advanced analytics, machine learning, generative AI systems, all of these are built on and fed by data pipelines. So as organizations invest more and more in these various initiatives, they turn to Ascend to greater automate those so they run faster, more efficiently, and more reliably than they were before.
Makes perfect sense, and indeed, no doubt there's a market for that. Let's talk about the automating of data pipelines. What exactly does it mean for companies? What are the challenges here? Is it laying the networking? Is it what is hard about this for companies?
Great question. So what we've seen over the course of the last, call it 10 to 15 years, the nature of scaling has actually changed pretty dramatically. 10 years ago, when you asked most CIOs and CTOs, the biggest challenge they had when it came to data, it was, how do I store enough data? How do I process enough data?
Right.
And, fast forward a decade, and companies of the likes of Snowflake and Databricks have done an amazing job of taking those challenges off the table. So now what we see is a fundamentally new set of challenges. There's still a challenge in how do you scale what you're doing with data, but it's actually very different than scaling the bits and bytes or the number of records or data sets. Now we've enabled 10 times, in many cases, even 100 times as many people to do things with data. And data, just like everything else in our world, has a life cycle. It starts with a bunch of raw data, it gets refined, it gets merged and unified with other data sets that eventually produce data products that go and feed the business and other organizations and other teams. And what we find is across this life cycle, that entire life cycle gets increasingly complex. And if we take 10 to 100 times as many people building data things, if you will,
apps, and tools, reports.
Exactly. Sure. And they all start building on top of each other. We get this just exponential explosion in complexity, not in the volume of data per se, but in the number of data products and data systems and the interconnectedness across these organizations. And now as data becomes the lifeblood for most organizations, that's a material risk to have an increasingly complex yet brittle architecture and design around how data is moving through your organization. And that's usually the prime point and opportunity to turn to automation to better solve for how do you manage and run these systems at really large scale and complexity.
Listening to you, I'm really struck that, back before ChatGPT was introduced in November of 2022, that caused obviously this mania about artificial intelligence. But before that, AI was certainly around. The big thing in 2022 was data analytics. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone needed to get it set up. Many people had gotten it set up. But you talk about all the challenges and how important it is and all the things that people do with data, whether it's building apps or tools or reports. And of course, data is obviously the lifeblood of artificial intelligence. It goes nowhere without a well-regulated and understood data repository. But I'm not even sure companies have the data part down yet, much less the AI part. I realize I'm off topic here, but it struck that data, setting up data is still as important as it was back before AI began to suck all the oxygen from the room. I'm not even sure that the companies have the data game down yet.
I think most don't, in all fairness. And I think that's okay. I think, we all, as part of the industry, are all very excited about generative AI. I personally am. I professionally am.
Sure.
I think it's going to be a very exciting 2024 and beyond.
Right.
And I think what I anticipate we're going to see going into 2024 is the interest and excitement around generative AI has done two things I think that are really, really important. The
Mm,
first thing is it has opened up, I think, a lot of investment channels
right.
for people to truly innovate and invest. The second thing that I think it has really done is it has honed people's focus around where do we need to deploy our resources. And when we
Hmm.
think about generative AI, at the end applications, closer to the business, closer to the consumer, closer to creating a value. And what's happening then as a result, that at least from Ascend's perspective, is
Hmm.
from our vantage point, I should say, is we're seeing a ton of companies say, gosh, we need to solve all this data pipelining and data platforming problem.
Right.
And
Right.
we can't take, a quarter of our IT organization, say, go build this new platform or this new, backbone, because we got to get all of our resources, our best and brightest on the to end application. So what are the standardized approaches we can take to this? And the reason why I think that is really hitting a peak level of urgency for organizations, we do an annual survey, completely blind, anonymous survey through an independent third party.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we have found over the last year is this tremendous interest in the category of automation. And
Yes.
oftentimes I talk about there's big AI and little AI, and
Hmm.
automation is sort of the little sibling to artificial intelligence.
Right.
But the reason why I think this is so important is as organizations are looking to get leverage, they need to better automate. And what we've seen is through this survey, less than 10%, I believe it was just about 8% of organizations today say they have automation in place. Every
Hmm.
organization is a data company, a data organization, but only 8% say they actually have true automation in place.
It's
Yet
an astounding statistic. It says really
it's
companies are lagging
amazing.
behind what they need to be doing with data.
Yep, exactly. And the really exciting part of it too was 80% or more said they intended on investing in automation in the next 12 months. And
Hmm.
so when we see that discrepancy between 8% of people have this true form automation, yet 80%, 10 times as many want it and intend on doing something about it in the next year, I
Right.
think signals this incredible need to, hey, we got to get all of this backbone and automation in place so we can really get to delivering significant business value around machine learning, AI, advanced analytics.
Well, all right. So then the challenges are clear. I mean, the question is, how do you recommend companies address these challenges? Specifically, how do many of these companies that are really not ready take either what is step one or maybe just step two or three? Where should they move them? How should they move themselves forward?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I do think it's a challenge for a number of organizations. The first thing I would absolutely recommend, and I would do this for most organizations, regardless of small or large, is to take an iterative approach.
Hmm.
And the reason why I think the iterative approach matters, and not in a classic technology approach of build in incremental layers, but rather build to solve distinct, unique business cases
Hmm.
with this new approach and expand it more horizontally throughout the organization. And the reason why I recommend that is oftentimes we see, especially really large organizations during periods such as this, take a step back and say, we're going to re architect a lot of how we do what we do.
Hmm.
And I think the scary part about that is those initiatives always take 2, 3, 4, even 5 years to really see the light of day if
Hmm.
well executed. Our world is going to look dramatically different in just 2 years from what it
Right.
does today.
Right. It's true.
And so taking a holistic re-architectural approach, I think it is of a high risk, greater risk than it has been in previous years. And so that's one of the reasons why I do recommend organizations take an incremental approach, but do it to create specific business value. So grab a particular team or a particular BU, grab a particular business case that creates value,
Uh-huh.
and take a rapid development and deployment strategy to delivering that business value and getting points up on the board for the
L-
business.
Let me make sure I understand it. You're saying there's actually a risk in taking a holistic strategy, and then instead, an incremental strategy is better than the holistic strategy.
Yeah, I think so. In the, one of Ascend has this, one of our core values as a company is build for 10x, plan for 100x. And so lean on an understanding of where you want to go, understand your holistic strategy. And I think this applies not just to Ascend, but any company out there.
Right.
But I think the rate of change is going to be so large that, or so fast, that what ends up happening for a lot of organizations, if you take a holistic re-architect and then we're going to rebuild for the entire company, those initiatives can take so long that by the time you really get done with just the core platform and the architecture, especially if you're trying to build a ton in-house,
Right.
the entire world will have changed by the time you
Yeah.
get your first project live. And I
Right.
think
Right.
that's in many ways the old data lake strategy that we saw a lot of companies try and drive, which was, well, we got to get all of our data into one spot. By the time you figured out like how to get most of your data in one spot, all these other, data pockets had started to emerge. And so you start to chase them down, and it becomes
Right.
really hard to execute too. And so I
Hmm.
think we've learned our lessons from previous eras in data, and that our industry just moves too fast.
Right.
And so we got to get wins put up on the board for any data team and get projects live, creating value for our end customers and consumers, and work iteratively through the broader parts of the organization as a result.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. Wins up on the board, especially in the worlds of data and AI, because it does move so quickly. Having a win up on the board does make a big difference. You've said that companies that don't have a sophisticated enough automation to power AI will start to feel the burn. Let's take a look at that statement. Are you saying, in other words, they'll simply fall behind competitively? What do you exactly do you mean with that?
Yeah, to me, in many ways, it's similar to watching organizations who were slower to adopt cloud. And as a result, they lost access to surge capacity for computational power. They lost access to some of the most advanced technologies that were cloud first. And so when we think about these macro evolutionary cycles around not just data, but cloud infrastructure and software,
Hmm.
when we see this move and this need to invest more and more in AI, a lot of that requires having high reliability, high performing underlying systems that feed that AI. And if we end up with more brittle or more fragile upstream systems, we're going to find that most organizations are putting disproportionate resources and actual, man and woman hours on building and maintaining those systems, as
Hmm.
opposed to which are a necessary part of the life cycle, but are not where the value is extracted for the
Right.
business.
Right.
And so we need to continue to do a shift right motion of resources and investments to get people to shift all their focus to closer and closer to the business value itself.
Gotcha.
And to
Okay.
me, it reminds me a lot of watching teams, where you have large teams still racking and stacking hardware, trying to build out their hosting infrastructure when their competitors were swiping credit cards for Amazon EC2 and quickly deploying to new regions and geographically expanding. I think we're seeing the same macro patterns play out.
Hmm. All right, well, let's drill down to Ascend itself. How is Ascend addressing the data pipeline needs of its clients? What specifically do you do? How does that work for companies?
Yeah, the way that Ascend addresses the data pipeline and automation needs of our customers, we do two things really, really well at Ascend. One is we pull together the capabilities required to build data pipelines. Everything from data ingest to transformation to orchestration. We give organizations a unified interface, and whether they have analytics engineers writing in SQL or data engineers writing in Python, we take this whole unified experience in the single pane of glass for both small and really large organizations, and we give them that unified set of capabilities.
Hmm.
No complex integrations required across other tools in the ecosystem. It all works as a really tightly integrated system. So that's the first part. The second incredible advantage that we get is once you have this tightly integrated system, the ability to better automate goes up dramatically. And
Hmm.
so the ability to track the life cycle of data, the lineage of data, to track code changes and the effects of those code changes and the cost on the pipeline, the resources consumed, who's making changes to what piece of data and where that's being published and used later.
Hmm.
All of these elements that you classically had to go write tremendous amounts of software for and throw far more manpower at doing. Once it's tightly integrated, now we have this ability to so greatly automate and alleviate the time to build, as well as actually the resources required to maintain data pipelines.
Okay. Well, I think the big question is the future of data pipeline automation. Obviously, it's going to be a really rapidly growing sector. What do you see looking, 1, 2, 3 years out? What will this market look like in, say, 2026, 2027?
I'm really excited about what the data pipeline and data automation landscape looks like in the next few years. I think we are going to see a tremendous ability twofold with generative AI. Of course, we're going to be able to create far more powerful and advanced AI models, but we're also going to actually see a lot more AI take place as part of how these systems run. As I mentioned a little bit before, which was we are able to track and collect so much data as part of these tightly integrated automated systems, the ability to increasingly provide really advanced AI around how is your data moving through the organization? What are the cost optimization capabilities we have? Who's tapping into what piece of data? Should they actually be trying to tap into the same piece of data? A lot of these things that we have historically thrown large IT organizations at, or really large governance efforts at, end up becoming really prime opportunities for automation and AI to give organizations far greater scale, far greater security and durability around their data itself. And I think ultimately we're going to see that the amount that a single individual can accomplish and achieve and how much they can really impact the business is going to go up exponentially because of the next wave of technology really bringing greater automation and AI capabilities to those builders.
Sean, I think you said it. Fascinating stuff. I learned a ton. Thank you for sharing your expertise today, and please do come back and talk with us again sometime.
Would love to. Thanks so much, James.